Welcome back to Fast Market here on the Schwab Network. It's time for cash tags. For that, let's bring in our next guest. That's going to be Landon Swan, co-founder at Likefolio. Welcome back to the show, Landon.
Thanks a lot. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday to you. Unofficial kickoff to earnings season. PepsiCo has been a really choppy trade. Had a good couple years, but it's kind of been going back and forth. I'm reading some of the stuff on PepsiCo. It seems like the consumer's kind of making different choices at this point. But what kind of data do you have? Because it's basically flat on the year.
Yeah, it is. It's actually, if you kind of zoom out a little bit, like a 3-year chart, it's very range bound. It broken up trend, and now it's kind of range bound, and we're sort of near the bottom of a range, even though we're up maybe I think 3 points from the last earnings report. And on that earnings report, I mean, they talked about how the consumer's weaker. There's weaker demand for both snacks and drinks. Especially in North America, the global market is looking a little stronger. They lowered their expectations from at least 4%, which the CEO said basically what meant 5, down to 4% growth on a year-over-year basis. And it's really all about the consumer looking for value. And if you think about what they sell, they sell drinks, they sell snacks. These are not necessities by any means. I mean, we're not talking about the price of chicken breasts or steaks or potatoes, things like that. I mean, you can go without pretty much everything that Pepsi makes, right? So if you're trying to cut costs, you can buy less soda, you can drink more water, you can buy less snacks, eat a little healthier. And so I think that's a little bit of a challenge for them. There's a survey that came out recently that showed that 83% of consumers are taking some kind of cost-cutting measures at the grocery store, including looking for items on sale and looking for store brands. And along that line, private labels are doing much, much better. We've seen a growth in private label brands of 2.3% versus the national brands like Pepsi and Coke of 1.1%. So they're more than double. Now they're actually up to about 20% market share. So they're private labels are coming after Pepsi, Coke, and all the others, General Mills, because of some of these challenges. People are just looking for ways to squeeze the dollar and make their money go a little bit farther. So the good news, though, for investors is I think a lot of this is priced in. I mean, everybody knows that the consumer is struggling a little bit, especially when on their last call they talked about it specifically. They've already lowered guidance slightly, and so the fact that the stock is basically at the sort of a bottom of a range. I like the priced in angle of this trade. We also see that Pepsi is doing a little bit better than Coke, and I don't think we added General Mills, but that's another one we looked at. Pepsi's doing a little bit better than General Mills as well, both on happiness and on just people talking about purchasing their products. So it's a slight edge, but it's an edge. And so you think about Pepsi, it's basically you got drinks in one category, that's Coke, and snacks in another, that's sort of General Mills. But they're doing better than both of those. So even though the demand is shrinking on a year-over-year basis, web visits, consumers talking about purchasing on social media, all of that, even though that's down, it's better than their competition. And the fact that it's all kind of priced in tells me that maybe we could have a little bit of a positive reaction. I don't think it's going to be a blowout surprise or anything like that, but I think it's just going to be, hey, we told you things were slowing down. They did slow down. Here's some reasons for us to be optimistic. And that's kind of what I'm expecting from them tomorrow morning.
Landon, I remember vividly from my youth, we used to drink soda, when we were young, and whenever the prices got too high, my dad would buy like the yummy cola and the crummy chips, and we'd be like, oh, come on. Yeah, oh, come on, And I remember being like, oh, yummy brand cola. And so, but when it was Pepsi, that was like, that was the good stuff, right? So, 2 years of price hikes. Looks like they're just starting to hit elasticity now, and they're having higher earnings per share as expected, but lower revenues. And eventually that's got to catch up with you. And by looking at the chart, it may have. Quaker Oats has got some issues with some callbacks, although they're like 3% of Pepsi's earnings. It's really Frito-Lay and it's North America. That's where they got to make their money, and a little Latin America is where they make their money. So if those things are good, and Gatorade's one of those, and less sugary drinks are one of those, and maybe this company can just do some cost cutting, get themselves right. Chart looks a little ugly, actually, Landon.
Yeah, it does. And it's up and down. It's kind of towards the bottom of the range. It's a little bit higher than when they reported their last earnings. I think it was just a few points, maybe 164, something like that, right before they reported before. So a lot of that I think is kind of priced in, but you're right. It's not a great segment to be in, especially when you look at, some of the political stuff that's going on. RFK talking about, he's kind of exposing all of the bad food that we're putting into our bodies. And, this is not, Pepsi is going to be on that list. A lot of the stuff in Gatorade, a lot of stuff in all their other products or snack products, Frito-Lay, that's all going to have ingredients that he's going to be hammering. So you wouldn't think that an election would really matter for a company like Pepsi, but I really do think that this election is important. I think if I'm a Pepsi investor, I'm rooting for Kamala, and I'm not rooting for Trump because of the RFK connections. That's going to be interesting. I know that, like I talked about, nothing that they sell is a necessity pretty much. I mean, Quaker, that's more of a food item, but you're right. It's a tiny percent, and with with all the recalls, I think there's a little trouble there. But they're talking about this report as revenue estimates are coming in at plus 1.6%. I think they can hit that. If you multiply that out times 4, that gets you above the 4% that they're talking about increasing on a year-over-year basis. So maybe the pace is accelerating, right? They'll still close out 2024 at the same kind of pace that they're expecting, 4%, but maybe 2025 can be better. So, yeah, you're right. It's going to catch up with them. All the cost cutting, all of that's, you got to have good margins, but the revenue is the key. And weakness in North America is not what you want to see. But I think the story is a lot of it, I think, is priced in.
So a lot of it's priced in there. What impact, Landon, are you guys seeing from the GLP-1 drugs? Because this is right up the alley of like, hey, if I'm not as hungry as I used to be, I'm definitely not buying any of this stuff. Is that come into play here at all for PepsiCo? Because everybody's talking about it's going to be a year or two when it's more widespread. But, hey, those are in the headlines, and people are buying that stuff. So you would think that Pepsi would be one of the first companies that would take it on the chin.
Right, absolutely, they would be one of the first. And when they first came out, when Ozempic and all the others first came out, we looked, and there was really nothing. It was not even a blip in the radar when it came to Pepsi products and snacks. But now we're seeing a little bit of an uptick. People talking specifically about decreased cravings or eating healthier, things like that, tied to those drugs. So I think it's starting to be a small impact. And if those drugs continue to be successful with low side effects, if that's the case a year or two from now, I think Pepsi may need to pivot a little bit more. I know they've got a lot of the seltzer drinks that have no calories, but most of what they sell is kind of on the don't eat list and don't drink list when it comes to healthy dieting, that kind of thing. It's all kind of junk food. So I do think that will accelerate over time if those drugs continue to be successful and continue to show low side effects. I think it's we're a long way away from checking that box, but you start to see your friends taking that drug, they're losing weight and they seem healthy, so you're like, you know what, I'll try it, and then all of a sudden you're not buying Frito products. So I think that's the concern. But right now, again, it's the decrease in I guess demand for these products. The snacks are down about 4% on our measurements. The beverages are down about 3%. Coke is worse than that on the beverages side, and General Mills is worse than that on the snack side. So, Pepsi, I think, is the better of the group. They're not in a great position over the next 10 years, but I think for this specific earnings call, I think it could be a little bit of all right, I think we're kind of low enough. We know what's going on with this company. Maybe it's worth slightly more than it's at. I don't think it's going to be a big move either way, but if I had to bet, it'd be to the positive side.
Yeah, definitely coming on to lows that we haven't seen since the end of July as far as price goes. All right, great stuff as always, Landon. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.